I'm Lily Harrison, 28 years old, and I'm standing in my corner office on the 40th floor, looking out at the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. My phone buzzes on the mahogany desk behind me. The notification shows a text from Dad. "Sweetheart, I saw the news about your hotels. We need to talk." 3 years ago, I walked down that wedding aisle alone, my father's empty chair mocking me from the front row. Today, my hotel empire is worth $580 million. I turn back to my phone, smile coldly, and delete his message without reading the rest. But before we dive into this story of betrayal, success, and the price of family loyalty, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your location in the comments below. And if you've ever felt abandoned by the people who should have supported you most, hit that like button because this story is going to take you on a journey you won't forget. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that prove sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. Now, let me tell you how a girl who was told she'd never amount to anything built a hotel empire that made headlines across the country. 5 years ago, I was 23 and fresh out of business school with my MBA clutched in my hands like a golden ticket to my future. The Harrison family had money, real money. My father Robert Harrison owned Harrison Properties, a commercial real estate company that had been buying and selling buildings in Texas for over 2 decades. Our house in Dallas was the kind of place you see in magazines, with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and a circular driveway that could fit 10 cars. I had spent my entire college years dreaming about hotels. Not just any hotels, but boutique properties that told stories, places where every room felt like stepping into a different world. While other girls my age were planning their weddings, I was planning business ventures. I had notebooks filled with sketches of lobby designs, marketing strategies, and financial projections that I'd worked on late into the night. The day I graduated, I marched into Dad's home office with a presentation folder under my arm and stars in my eyes. The room smelled like leather and expensive cologne, exactly how I remembered it from childhood when I'd sneak in to watch him work. Dad was sitting behind his massive oak desk, still wearing his golf clothes from his afternoon game. "Dad, I want to talk to you about an investment opportunity," I began, spreading my carefully prepared documents across his desk. "I want to start a boutique hotel chain. I found the perfect property in Austin, and with a $2 million initial investment, we could." He cut me off with a laugh that felt like ice water in my veins. "Lily, sweetheart, you just finished school. You don't know anything about running a real business. Hotels are complicated, risky. Why don't you find yourself a nice job at someone else's company, learn the ropes for a few years?" That's when my stepmother Victoria glided into the room like she owned it, which I suppose she did. Victoria was 45, blonde, and had married my father when I was 16, just 2 years after my mother died in a car accident. She perched herself on the arm of Dad's chair, her perfectly manicured hand resting on his shoulder. "Honey, maybe you should find a nice husband instead of playing businesswoman," Victoria said with that sugar-sweet voice that never fooled me. "A girl your age should be thinking about starting a family, not chasing these unrealistic dreams." My half-brother Blake wandered in next, probably drawn by the sound of conflict like a shark smelling blood in the water. At 25, Blake had never worked a day in his life, living off Dad's money while supposedly finding himself through various failed artistic endeavors. This month it was photography, last month it was screenwriting. "Yeah, Lily, maybe stick to something more your speed," Blake added, not even looking up from his phone. "Running a hotel is man's work anyway." I felt my cheeks burning with humiliation and anger. These were the people who were supposed to support me, believe in me, help me achieve my dreams. Instead, they were treating me like a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. "I'm not asking for charity," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is a solid investment opportunity. The hospitality industry is growing, and boutique hotels are outperforming chain properties in major markets. I have the education, the passion, and the business plan. All I need is the capital." Dad leaned back in his chair, studying me with those cold blue eyes that had intimidated me since childhood. Lily, I'd built everything I have through careful, calculated risks. I'm not about to throw away $2 million on my daughter's hobby. It's not a hobby, it's my career, I shot back. Then prove it, he said. If you're so confident in your abilities, do it yourself. Don't come running to daddy for money. I stared at him for a long moment, feeling something fundamental shift between us. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about respect, about whether he saw me as a capable adult or just as little girl playing pretend. I gathered up my documents, my hands shaking slightly with rage and determination. Fine, I said. I will. As I headed for the door, Dad called after me. Lily, when this fantasy falls apart, and it will, don't expect me to pick up the pieces. I won't enable your mistakes. That night, I sat in my apartment downtown, surrounded by loan applications and business plans, making the decision that would change everything. I was going to prove them all wrong, even if it killed me. 3 months later, I was holding the keys to my first property. A run-down historic building in Austin that would become the Pearl Austin. The previous owner had been trying to sell for 2 years, and I got it for $800,000. Using every cent of my trust fund for the down payment and securing a business loan for the renovation costs that made my accountant physically wince. The building was beautiful in a broken way, with original hardwood floors buried under decades of carpet, floor-to-ceiling windows that hadn't been cleaned since the Reagan administration, and crown molding that would be stunning once I stripped away layers of paint. It was everything I had dreamed of and more work than I had ever imagined. I threw myself into the renovation with the kind of desperate energy that only comes from having everything to prove. I was there every morning at 6, working alongside contractors, learning to read blueprints, and making thousands of tiny decisions that would determine whether this dream became reality or the expensive mistake everyone expected it to be. That's when the sabotage started. First, it was small things. My interior designer, a woman I'd hired based on her impressive portfolio and reasonable rates, called me on a Tuesday morning with panic in her voice. Lily, I'm so sorry, but I have to withdraw from your project. Something urgent has come up with a family matter. I was confused but understanding. Family emergencies happen. I'd find another designer. But when the contractor called 3 hours later with an almost identical excuse, my confusion turned to suspicion. And when the kitchen equipment supplier called that afternoon to cancel our order, claiming they'd discovered irregularities in our payment terms, I knew this wasn't coincidence. I spent the next week making phone calls, trying to piece together what had happened. It took bribing a secretary with expensive coffee and appealing to her sense of justice before I got the truth. Someone had been calling my vendors, claiming to represent Harrison Properties, and offering them more lucrative contracts if they dropped my project immediately. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My own family was actively sabotaging my business. Not just refusing to help, but working to ensure I failed. I sat in my empty hotel lobby, surrounded by sawdust and half-finished walls, and called my father. Dad, I know what you're doing, I said without preamble when he answered. I don't know what you're talking about, Lily. His voice was infuriatingly calm. The contractors, the suppliers, the designer. Someone from Harrison Properties has been contacting them. There was a pause. Then, business is tough, princess. Maybe you should come home. You're sabotaging your own daughter's business. I'm teaching you a lesson about the real world. This industry will chew you up and spit you out. I'm doing you a favor. I hung up on him and immediately called the one person I knew I could trust, Sophia Martinez, my roommate from business school and the smartest person I'd ever met. Sophia had graduated top of our class and was working for a venture capital firm in Houston, but when I explained what was happening, she didn't hesitate. I'll be there this weekend with $500,000 and a list of contractors who owe me favors, she said. Your family wants to play dirty? Fine. We'll show them what dirty looks like. That weekend, Sophia arrived like a one-woman army. She brought contracts with 3 new vendors, a timeline that would get us back on track, and the kind of righteous anger that only comes from watching your friend get screwed over by the people who should protect her. We worked 18-hour days, and I learned to lay tile, install lighting fixtures, and negotiate with suppliers who tried to charge us double because they thought we were desperate. 2 months later, Blake showed up at the construction site. I was on a ladder, hanging art in the lobby, when I heard his voice echoing through the space. "Wow, Lily, this place actually looks pretty good," he said, and I could hear the surprise in his voice. I climbed down to face him, my clothes covered in paint and my hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "What do you want, Blake?" "Dad sent me to check on your progress." "He's worried about you." "Dad's worried about me failing, not about me," I corrected. "And since when do you run errands for him?" Blake shrugged, that careless gesture that had annoyed me our entire lives. "He just wants to make sure you're safe. This is a rough neighborhood." I looked around at the trendy coffee shops and art galleries that surrounded my hotel. "It's the arts district, Blake. The most dangerous thing here is overpriced avocado toast." He wandered around the lobby, taking pictures with his phone, asking questions about my renovation timeline, my target opening date, my marketing strategy. At the time, I thought he was finally showing genuine interest in my project. I even felt a little surge of hope that maybe my family was starting to come around. It wasn't until I found the hidden camera in my office 3 weeks later that I realized Blake's visit hadn't been about family concern. It had been reconnaissance. While I was fighting my family's sabotage efforts, I met Nathan Crawford at a small business networking event downtown. He was 32, tall and confident, with dark hair that was perfectly styled and a smile that made me forget about contracts and construction timelines. Nathan was a partner at Crawford & Associates, one of Austin's most prestigious law firms, specializing in corporate law and mergers. "You're the hotel girl," he said when we were introduced, and something about the way he said it, with respect rather than condescension, made my heart skip. "I've been following your story in the business journal. What you're doing is impressive." For the first time in months, I felt seen. Not as Robert Harrison's disappointing daughter or the little girl playing businesswoman, but as Lily Harrison, entrepreneur. Nathan and I talked for 2 hours that night, about business, about dreams, about the courage it takes to bet everything on yourself. When he asked me to dinner the following weekend, I said yes before he'd finished the question. Dating Nathan felt like stepping into a different world, one where my ambitions were attractive rather than threatening. He took me to elegant restaurants where he knew the managers personally, introduced me to his colleagues as the brilliant woman who's revolutionizing Austin hospitality, and listened to my daily challenges with the kind of focused attention that made me feel like the most important person in the room. The Pearl Austin was finally ready for its soft opening 6 months after I'd bought the building. Nathan helped me navigate the permits, the insurance requirements, and the maze of city regulations that I never would have managed alone. He even brought potential investors to tour the property, men in expensive suits who nodded approvingly at my revenue projections and asked thoughtful questions about my expansion plans. "You've done something incredible here," Nathan told me the night before our grand opening, as we stood in the lobby that had been transformed from a construction zone into something magical. The space was warm and inviting, with exposed brick walls, carefully curated local art, and furniture that invited guests to linger. "Your father has no idea what he passed up." The grand opening exceeded my wildest expectations. We were booked solid for the first 3 months, and the local food and travel bloggers couldn't stop raving about the experience. The Austin Chronicle called it a love letter to Texas hospitality, and I was featured in Texas Monthly as one of the state's rising young entrepreneurs. For the first time since I'd started this journey, I felt like maybe I was going to make it. Maybe I really could build something that mattered, something that would prove I was more than Robert Harrison's stubborn daughter. That's when Victoria decided to play her hand. She called me on a Thursday afternoon, her voice syrupy with false warmth. "Lily, darling, I know we've had our differences, but I'd love to have you and Nathan over for dinner this Sunday. Families should support each other, don't you think?" I should have said no. Every instinct I had was screaming that this was a trap. But Nathan encouraged me to go, saying that family reconciliation was always worth pursuing, and deep down, I still harbored a foolish hope that maybe they were finally ready to accept me. Sunday dinner at the Harrison house was exactly as formal and uncomfortable as I remembered. Victoria had prepared an elaborate meal and set the dining room table with her best china and crystal. Dad was on his best behavior, asking Nathan about his law practice and discussing Austin's real estate market with the kind of expertise that had made him wealthy. "Nathan, I've been following your firm's work," Dad said over the main course. "You handled the Morrison Plaza acquisition beautifully. That kind of attention to detail is exactly what I look for in business partners." I felt a strange chill run down my spine. "Business partners?" Dad smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "Actually, I've been meaning to discuss something with you, Nathan. I'm putting together an investment group for a new commercial development in downtown Dallas. Premium office space, mixed-use retail, the works. It's a $200 million project, and I could use someone with your legal expertise and connections." Nathan set down his fork, and I saw something in his expression that made my stomach drop. "That sounds like an incredible opportunity, Mr. Harrison." "It is. I'm talking about a full partnership, not just legal services. Your investment return would be substantial, probably more than you'd make in 5 years of traditional practice." I looked between my father and my boyfriend, watching something pass between them that excluded me entirely. "Dad, Nathan and I are together. If you want to discuss business with him, you should include me in the conversation." Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh sweetheart, this is men's business. Why don't you and I go to the kitchen and let them talk?" "No." The word came out harder than I intended. "If this involves Nathan, it involves me." Dad leaned back in his chair, studying me with those calculating eyes. "All right, Lily. You want to be included? Here's what I'm offering Nathan. A $10 million partnership in Harrison Development Group, with guaranteed returns of at least 15% annually. All he has to do is join my legal team and help me expand into the Austin market." The room went completely silent. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. I turned to Nathan, waiting for him to tell my father that he wasn't interested, that he was committed to building something with me. Instead, Nathan cleared his throat and said, "Mr. Harrison, that's a very generous offer. I'd be interested in discussing the details." I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. "Nathan, what are you talking about?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Lily, this is business. You have to understand, an opportunity like this doesn't come along every day." "What about my business? What about us?" That's when Dad revealed his final card. "Nathan, I should mention that I've already drawn up the partnership papers. I had my attorneys prepare them 3 months ago, right after I did my research on your background and your relationship with my daughter." 3 months ago. Right around the time Nathan had started helping me with legal issues, bringing investors to tour my property, gaining access to all my business plans and financial information. I stood up from the table, my legs shaky with rage and betrayal. "You've been working with him for 3 months? You've been spying on me?" Nathan finally looked at me, and I saw guilt and greed warring in his expression. "Your father offered me a partnership worth $10 million, Lily. I couldn't say no to an opportunity like that. So everything, all of it, was you gathering information for him?" "I did care about you," Nathan said quietly. "That part was real." Victoria was smiling now, not even bothering to hide her satisfaction. "Lily, darling, surely you didn't think someone like Nathan would choose your little hotel over a real business opportunity?" I looked around the table at these people who had systematically destroyed every dream I'd tried to build. My father, who had raised me to be strong and independent until the moment I actually tried to be those things. My stepmother, who saw me as competition for attention and resources. My half-brother, who had never had to work for anything in his life. And now Nathan, who had made me believe that someone could love me and support my ambitions at the same time. Get out, I whispered. Lily, Nathan started. Get out. I screamed, loud enough that the crystal glasses rang with the vibration. All of you. I never want to see any of you again. I drove back to my hotel that night in a state of shock that gradually gave way to a fury unlike anything I'd ever experienced. They thought they could break me, that without their money and their connections and their approval I would crumble. They had no idea what I was capable of when I had nothing left to lose. The betrayal with Nathan taught me something important. I couldn't build this empire by trusting the wrong people, but I also couldn't build it alone. I needed allies, real ones who had their own reasons for wanting to see me succeed rather than people who saw me as either a threat or an opportunity. That's how I met Elena Rodriguez. Elena walked into the Pearl Austin on a rainy Tuesday morning, introduced herself as the former general manager of the Four Seasons Dallas, and asked if I was hiring for management positions. She was 35, impeccably dressed, with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from years of managing multi-million-dollar operations. More importantly, she had the hollow look in her eyes that I recognized from my own mirror, the expression of someone who had been betrayed by people she trusted. Why did you leave Four Seasons? I asked during our interview in the hotel's small business center. Elena's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I was asked to participate in certain irregular accounting practices. When I refused, they found reasons to terminate my employment. They fired you for being honest. They destroyed my reputation in the industry, she corrected. I've been unemployed for 8 months because they made sure everyone in Dallas hospitality knew I was difficult to work with. I hired her on the spot, not just because of her credentials, but because I recognized something in her that matched what was growing in me, a determination to prove that integrity and excellence could triumph over corruption and politics. Elena brought something to the Pearl Austin that I hadn't even known we were missing, the kind of operational sophistication that turned a good hotel into an exceptional one. Under Elena's management, our guest satisfaction score soared. She implemented systems for everything from housekeeping to customer service that ensured every guest felt like they were the most important person in the building. Our repeat booking rate hit 80%, and we were getting inquiries about opening a second location within 6 months of our grand opening. That's when I decided to expand to New Orleans. The property I found was a 19th-century mansion in the Garden District that had been converted into apartments and then abandoned during Hurricane Katrina. It was a massive project, requiring historic preservation permits, environmental remediation, and the kind of architectural expertise that most developers would have deemed too risky. But I saw potential where others saw problems, and most importantly, I saw an opportunity to build something that would make my father's little real estate company look like amateur hour. We called it the Magnolia, and from the day we announced the project, my family ramped up their sabotage efforts to a level that bordered on harassment. Robert hired a public relations firm to plant negative stories about me in industry publications, questioning my experience and suggesting that my success was due to family money rather than talent. Victoria started an online review campaign, creating fake accounts to leave 1-star reviews claiming everything from bed bugs to food poisoning at the Pearl Austin. But the most sophisticated attack came from Blake, who had apparently discovered an aptitude for cyber warfare. He attempted to hack our booking system, trying to access guest information and financial records that he could use to damage our reputation. The only reason he didn't succeed was because Elena had insisted we hire top-tier cybersecurity from the beginning, a precaution that seemed excessive until it became essential. Your family really doesn't want you to succeed, Elena observed one evening as we reviewed the latest batch of fake negative reviews that had appeared overnight. They're terrified that I might actually make it, I replied. If I succeed without them, it proves that everything they said about me was wrong, and people like my father can't handle being wrong. That's when Elena made a suggestion that changed everything. What if we stop playing defense and start playing offense? She introduced me to Marcus Williams, a private investigator who specialized in corporate espionage and had helped several of her former colleagues uncover the accounting irregularities that had cost her job. Marcus was a quiet man in his 40s who looked more like a college professor than a spy, but Elena assured me he was the best in the business. Your father is coming after you through legal channels, public relations, and cyber attacks, Marcus explained during our first meeting. But men like Robert Harrison usually have secrets they don't want exposed. Give me a month, and I'll find his weak spots. I wasn't sure I wanted to know what Marcus might discover about my father, but I was tired of being the only one playing by the rules in this war. I gave him a retainer and tried to focus on the business while he did whatever it was that private investigators do. The Magnolia opened 18 months later to reviews that surpassed even my optimistic projections. Travel and Leisure called it a masterpiece of Southern hospitality, and Condé Nast Traveler featured it on their cover with the headline, "The Future of Luxury Travel." We were booked solid for the next year, and I was fielding calls from investors who wanted to help fund additional properties. That's when Marcus called with information that made my blood run cold. Your father has been working with Gregory Thompson, a health department inspector, to manufacture violations at your properties, he told me over the phone. Thompson is being paid to conduct surprise inspections and file false reports that could shut you down. How do you know this? Bank records, phone conversations, and Thompson's ex-wife, who's tired of watching him take bribes while she struggles to pay their kids' medical bills. I felt sick to my stomach. Manufacturing health code violations wasn't just sabotage, it was potentially criminal, and it could destroy everything Elena and I had built. When is he planning to do this? Tomorrow morning. He's targeting the Pearl Austin first. I spent that night wide awake, staring at the ceiling and trying to decide how far I was willing to go to protect my business. By morning, I had my answer. Gregory Thompson arrived at the Pearl Austin at 9 a.m. sharp, flanked by 2 junior inspectors and carrying a clipboard that might as well have been a weapon. I was waiting for him in the lobby, dressed in my best business suit and armed with my own clipboard plus a video camera that I'd positioned to capture everything. "Ms. Harrison," Thompson said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "this is a routine health and safety inspection. I'm sure you understand the importance of maintaining proper standards." "Absolutely," I replied with matching false courtesy. "I appreciate the health department's commitment to protecting our guests. I prepared complete documentation of all our safety protocols, and my general manager Elena Rodriguez is available to answer any questions." What followed was the most blatantly dishonest inspection I've ever witnessed. Thompson discovered violations that simply didn't exist. Claiming our kitchen refrigeration was inadequate when our temperature logs showed perfect compliance, finding unsanitary conditions in bathrooms that had been professionally cleaned 2 hours earlier, and documenting structural safety issues in areas that had been inspected and certified by city engineers just 3 months before. The most egregious moment came when Thompson claimed to find evidence of rodent infestation in our kitchen storage area. He triumphantly held up what he claimed was rodent droppings, making a show of photographing the evidence for his report. What he didn't notice was that Elena and I had placed hidden cameras in every area of the hotel the night before, cameras that clearly showed him planting the fake evidence that he discovered moments later. "I'm afraid I'm going to have to recommend immediate closure pending remediation of these serious violations," Thompson announced after 3 hours of theatrical investigation. "That seems excessive," I said calmly. "Perhaps we could discuss a timeline for addressing your concerns?" Thompson's smile became predatory. "Some violations require immediate action, Ms. Harrison. Public safety can't wait for convenient timing." That afternoon, the Pearl Austin received an official closure order effective immediately. We had 72 hours to vacate all guests and could not reopen until we had addressed every violation on Thompson's list and passed a re-inspection. The list included requirements that were physically impossible to meet in the given timeframe, like complete kitchen renovation and structural pest control assessment. I lost $800,000 in the month that the Pearl Austin was closed. Cancelled bookings, refunded deposits, lost revenue from our restaurant and event spaces, plus the cost of the fraudulent remediation work that Thompson required. We were hemorrhaging money so fast that I had to take emergency loans against the Magnolia just to keep paying our staff. That's when Nathan reappeared in my life like a bad penny. He showed up at my temporary office in a downtown co-working space, still wearing those expensive suits that had once impressed me but now just looked like costumes. "Lily, I heard about the inspection problems. I wanted to see if there was anything I could do to help." I didn't look up from the bankruptcy calculations I was reviewing. "Help? That's interesting, considering you've been feeding information to my father for the better part of a year." "That was business. This is personal. I never wanted to see you actually fail." Now I did look up, studying his face for any trace of the man I thought I loved. "What do you want, Nathan?" He sat down across from me, leaning forward with the earnest expression he'd always used when he was about to ask for something. "I've been following your legal troubles, and I think I can help you get the hotel reopened quickly. My firm has connections with the health department, and we know how to navigate these kinds of bureaucratic challenges. For a price, I'm sure." "I'm not asking for money, Lily. I'm asking for a partnership. Let me help you resolve this crisis, and in return, I'd like you to consider bringing me on as your legal counsel and business partner. 51% for you, 49% for me." I stared at him for a long moment, genuinely amazed at his audacity. "You want me to give you half of my company in exchange for helping me solve a problem that your business partner created? This isn't about your father. This is about us, about what we could build together." "Nathan," I said, standing up and walking to the window, "let me explain something to you. You betrayed me once for money. You're trying to do it again for equity. The only difference is that this time, I see you coming." His mask slipped for just a moment, showing the calculation underneath. "Your father has more tricks up his sleeve, Lily. Without proper legal protection and business connections, you're not going to survive what's coming next." "Is that a threat?" "It's reality. You're fighting a war with amateurs' weapons against professionals. I'm offering you a chance to level the playing field." I turned back to face him, and for the first time in this conversation, I smiled. "Nathan, you still don't understand what you're dealing with. I'm not the scared girl who needed your help anymore. I've learned to play this game, and I'm better at it than any of you expected. Lily, be reasonable. Your hotel is closed, you're burning through cash, and your reputation is being destroyed in the press. Pride isn't going to pay your bills." That's when my father decided to make his grand entrance. The elevator doors opened and Robert Harrison stepped into the co-working space like he owned it, which, knowing my father's real estate portfolio, he very well might have. He was impeccably dressed as always, projecting that casual authority that came from decades of intimidating people into submission. "Hello, princess," he said, and the condescension in that single word made my teeth ache. "I thought it was time we had a conversation." "About what?" "About ending this foolish rebellion before you destroy yourself completely." He looked around the generic office space with obvious distaste. "Look at what you've reduced yourself to. Working out of a cubicle farm, begging for loans to keep your little project afloat. This is what independence gets you." "I'm not begging for anything, Dad. I'm building something." "You're failing spectacularly," he corrected. "And you're embarrassing the Harrison name in the process. Do you have any idea what people are saying about me? About how I raised a daughter who can't recognize her own limitations?" I felt that familiar rage building in my chest, the same fury that had driven me to start this journey in the first place. "I gave you everything, Dad. I offered you respect, love, the chance to be part of something meaningful. And you chose to try to destroy me instead." "I chose to protect you from your own delusions," he shot back. "I offered you a good life, a safe life. Instead, you decided to throw it away chasing fantasies." "My fantasies are worth $800 million on paper," I said quietly. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. "What?" "My little hotel project, Dad. The one that was supposed to fail? We're in negotiations with 3 investment groups who want to fund a national expansion. The preliminary valuation came in last week." Robert's composure cracked slightly. "That's impossible. No bank will lend you money," I continued, quoting his words back to him. No investor will trust you. That's what you said, right? Well, it turns out that when you build something excellent, when you treat people with respect and deliver on your promises, trust isn't actually that hard to earn. My father stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him recalculating everything he thought he knew about this situation. If what you're saying is true, then we can work together. I can help you expand faster, smarter. You need experienced guidance. From the man who's been sabotaging me for 2 years? That was business, Lily. This is family. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it whatsoever. Family? Dad, you tried to destroy my business, corrupted a health inspector to fabricate violations, and turned my boyfriend into a spy. At what point do you think I decided you weren't family anymore? You're still my daughter. No, I said, walking to my desk and pulling out the documents Marcus had compiled. I'm your competitor. And tomorrow morning, I'm going to prove it. Robert's eyes narrowed as he recognized the threat in my voice. What are you planning? You'll see. I looked at both him and Nathan, these men who had underestimated me at every turn. Now get out of my office. I have a business empire to build. That evening, as I sat in my empty hotel lobby staring at the closure notice taped to our front door, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end changed everything. Ms. Harrison? This is Harrison Stone. I nearly dropped the phone. Harrison Stone was a legend in commercial real estate, a man who had built shopping malls, office complexes, and resort destinations across the southwestern United States. His net worth was estimated at over $2 billion, and his business philosophy was the stuff of Harvard Business School case studies. Mr. Stone, how can I help you? Actually, I'm calling to see how I can help you. I've been following your situation with great interest, and I'd like to meet in person to discuss a potential investment opportunity. 24 hours later, I was sitting across from Harrison Stone in his Dallas penthouse office, trying not to be intimidated by the man who had built an empire that dwarfed my father's company. Stone was 60 years old, silver-haired, and had the kind of quiet intensity that made you understand why he'd succeeded where so many others had failed. Your father and I have a history, Stone began without preamble. 15 years ago, Robert Harrison was my partner in a mixed-use development project in downtown Dallas. We had investors lined up, permits approved, and contracts signed. 3 days before groundbreaking, Robert pulled out of the deal and took our financing with him to fund a competing project across the street. I felt my stomach drop. He stole your deal? He stole everything. The investors, the contractors, even the architectural plans. I lost 18 months of work and nearly went bankrupt fighting the legal battles that followed. Robert Harrison taught me that some people will smile to your face while they plan to destroy you. Why are you telling me this? Stone leaned forward, his eyes never leaving mine. Because I've been watching you build something extraordinary despite his best efforts to stop you. You remind me of myself 30 years ago, hungry and stubborn and absolutely convinced that excellence would eventually triumph over politics. I want to offer you $50 million to expand Harrison Luxury Hotels to the West Coast. The number was so large that I actually had trouble processing it. $50 million was enough to buy properties in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and San Diego simultaneously. It was enough to turn my boutique hotel concept into a legitimate competitor to major chains. What do you want in return? 20% equity and the satisfaction of watching Robert Harrison realize that his daughter is 10 times the businessman he'll ever be. I studied Stone's face, looking for the catch, the hidden agenda, the betrayal that I'd learned to expect from every seemingly generous offer. But all I saw was the cold satisfaction of a man who had waited 15 years for the perfect revenge. Mr. Stone, with respect, how do I know you won't do to me what my father did to you? He smiled for the first time in our conversation. Because, Ms. Harrison, I keep my promises. It's what separates successful people from people like your father. 3 weeks later, armed with Stone's investment and Elena's operational expertise, we purchased 3 properties simultaneously. A historic theater building in downtown Los Angeles that we would convert into the Golden State, a Victorian mansion in San Francisco's Nob Hill district that would become the Pacific Heights, and a beachfront property in San Diego that was perfect for the Sunset Coast. The expansion happened with a speed that shocked even me. Elena managed the logistics of 3 simultaneous renovations while I handled the design concepts and marketing strategy. Each hotel had its own personality. The Golden State was old Hollywood glamour meets modern luxury, the Pacific Heights was elegant and intimate with views of the bay, and the Sunset Coast was relaxed sophistication designed for guests who wanted to feel like they were staying at a friend's beach house, if that friend happened to be a millionaire with impeccable taste. When news of our expansion broke in the hospitality industry press, my father's reaction was swift and predictable. He called Harrison Stone directly, trying to intimidate him into withdrawing his investment. "Your daughter is inexperienced and undercapitalized," Robert told Stone, according to the recording that Stone gleefully played for me later. "You're throwing away money on a girl who's in over her head." Stone's response was a masterpiece of controlled fury. "Robert, I've been watching your daughter outmaneuver you for 2 years while you've resorted to bribing health inspectors and hiring cybercriminals. If I were you, I'd be less concerned about her experience and more worried about what she's learned about fighting dirty from watching you." That conversation ended with Robert threatening legal action and Stone calmly explaining exactly how many lawyers he kept on retainer specifically for dealing with men who confused bluster with power. The grand openings for all 3 West Coast properties were scheduled for the same weekend in March, a logistical nightmare that Elena somehow managed to orchestrate flawlessly. The press coverage was everything I had dreamed of, features in Architectural Digest, Vogue, and Forbes, with photography that made our hotels look like something out of a fairy tale. But the coverage that mattered most came from an unexpected source. The Wall Street Journal ran a full-page feature about young entrepreneurs disrupting traditional industries, with my story as the centerpiece. The headline read, "When Family Money Says No, Some Heirs Build Their Own Fortunes." The article detailed my father's refusal to invest, his attempts at sabotage, and the family rift that had driven me to prove myself independently. It was fair but devastating, painting Robert Harrison as a small-minded man who had been too proud to recognize his daughter's potential. The morning the article published, Victoria tried to sabotage our Los Angeles grand opening by hiring protesters to claim that our renovation had displaced low-income residents. What she hadn't counted on was Elena's community outreach program, which had partnered with local nonprofits to provide job training and employment opportunities for neighborhood residents. When the fake protesters showed up, they were outnumbered by real community members who supported what we were doing. The photos that ran in the Los Angeles Times the next day showed me shaking hands with the neighborhood council president while fake protesters lurked awkwardly in the background. The caption read, "Local hotel entrepreneur builds bridges while competitors build walls." By the end of our first quarter in California, Harrison Luxury Hotels was operating at 95% capacity across all 5 properties. We had waiting lists for bookings, a corporate partnership with 3 major entertainment companies, and inquiries about international expansion. More importantly, we had proven that ethical business practices and genuine community engagement could triumph over family money and dirty politics. That's when my father made his final, desperate play. 2 years after our West Coast expansion, Harrison Luxury Hotels had become more than just a successful business. We had created a brand that represented a completely new approach to luxury hospitality. Travel writers compared us to the great hotel pioneers of the early 20th century, and business schools were studying our growth model as an example of how to scale a boutique concept without losing its soul. I was 26 years old and running a company valued at over $200 million, with properties in 5 cities and plans for national expansion. More importantly, I had found my voice as a leader and entrepreneur, becoming the kind of person who commanded respect in boardrooms and industry conferences. That's when I met Ethan Blake. Ethan was a chef, not connected to my family or their business interests in any way, which immediately made him attractive to me. He was 30 years old, had trained in France, and was opening his own restaurant in Austin just a few blocks from the Pearl. We met at a local business mixer, and I was immediately struck by his passion for his craft and his complete disinterest in my money or connections. "I don't really know anything about the hotel business," he admitted over our first dinner together, "but I know good food and good service when I see them. Your restaurant at the Pearl is exceptional." For the first time since Nathan's betrayal, I felt like I could trust someone with my heart as well as my professional respect. Ethan was building his own dream, just like I was, and he understood the sacrifices and compromises that entrepreneurship demanded. When he proposed 8 months later, I said yes without hesitation. Planning our wedding should have been pure joy, but it became another battlefield in my ongoing war with my family. I wanted to believe that my success might have finally earned their respect, that they might be ready to accept me as an adult who had proven herself in the business world. So despite Elena's warnings and my own better judgment, I sent wedding invitations to Robert, Victoria, and Blake. 2 weeks before the wedding, as Ethan and I were finalizing seating arrangements and menu selections, my father called. "Lily, we need to talk about this wedding situation," he said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of authority that I'd been conditioned to respond to since childhood. "What about it, Dad? I think you know that your stepmother and I have concerns about this marriage. Ethan seems like a nice enough young man, but he's clearly marrying you for your money. A real man would want to provide for his wife, not live off her success." I felt the familiar rage building, but I kept my voice steady. "Dad, Ethan is opening his own restaurant. He's not interested in my money, he's building his own career. Lily, you're being naive. Men like that target successful women because it's easier than building their own wealth. If you insist on going through with this wedding, I expect you to get a prenuptial agreement that protects the family assets." "My assets, Dad. Not family assets. I built this company without your money or your help." "You built it with my name," he corrected coldly. "Harrison Luxury Hotels trades on the Harrison reputation, whether you want to admit it or not. I have a responsibility to protect that legacy." I took a deep breath, trying one more time to bridge the gap that had divided us for years. "Dad, I want you at my wedding. I want you to walk me down the aisle. But I need you to accept that I'm an adult who can make her own decisions about marriage and business." There was a long pause before he responded. "I won't attend unless you apologize for the embarrassment you've caused this family and agree to sell the business to more qualified operators. It's time to end this charade and come home." "This isn't a charade, Dad. This is my life, my career, my success. It's a fantasy that's gone on too long. I've been patient, hoping you'd grow out of this rebellious phase, but you're 26 years old, Lily. It's time to act like an adult." I hung up the phone and immediately called Elena, tears streaming down my face for the first time in years. "He's not coming to the wedding unless I give up everything I built." "Then he's not coming to the wedding," Elena said simply. "Lily, you don't need his approval anymore. You haven't needed it for years." "I know that. But I wanted it anyway." "I understand. But you can't sacrifice your future for his ego." The wedding day itself was beautiful and heartbreaking in equal measure. The ceremony was held at the Magnolia in New Orleans, with the garden transformed into something magical with thousands of white flowers and string lights that turned the evening into a fairy tale. Our guests included business partners, hotel industry colleagues, and the staff members who had become like family to me over the years of building our company. But as I walked down the aisle in my grandmother's wedding dress, the empty chairs in the front row felt like a physical weight. My father's chair, Victoria's chair, Blake's chair, all conspicuously empty despite the beautiful ceremony happening around them. Sophia walked me down the aisle instead, and Elena gave a toast that made everyone cry, but the absence of my family cast a shadow over what should have been the happiest day of my life. The only communication I received from them that day was a text message from Victoria sent during our first dance: "Enjoy your little party, dear. Daddy will be here when you're ready to grow up." I showed the message to Ethan later that night, and he held me while I cried for the family I'd lost in the process of finding myself. "They're the ones missing out," he whispered into my hair. They could have been here celebrating with an incredible woman who built something amazing. Instead, they're sitting at home nursing their wounded pride. The next morning, gossip columns in Dallas and Austin ran photos from our wedding with headlines like "Estranged Heiress Celebrates Without Family" and "Harrison Hotel's Founder Marries Despite Father's Disapproval." The coverage was sympathetic to me but devastating to my father's reputation, painting him as a bitter man who couldn't accept his daughter's success. I should have felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt empty. I had everything I'd dreamed of building. A successful company, a beautiful marriage, respect in my industry, financial independence. But the cost had been higher than I'd expected, and as I looked at those wedding photos with the conspicuously empty front row, I wondered if winning was supposed to feel this lonely. 2 years after my wedding, Harrison Luxury Hotels was preparing for its initial public offering, a moment I had been building towards since that first conversation with my father in his home office. The company had grown to 12 properties across 8 states, with a management team that included some of the most respected names in hospitality and a brand reputation that commanded premium pricing in every market we entered. Elena had been promoted to Chief Operating Officer, and her operational excellence had become one of our key competitive advantages. Every hotel operated at capacity factors that exceeded industry standards, and our guest satisfaction scores were consistently the highest in the luxury segment. More importantly, we had built a company culture based on respect and excellence that attracted the best talent in the industry. The IPO process was both thrilling and terrifying, involving months of meetings with investment banks, institutional investors, and securities regulators. When the final prospectus was filed, Harrison Luxury Hotels was valued at $580 million, making my 65% stake worth nearly $400 million on paper. The day before our stock began trading publicly, Fortune magazine published a cover story about me titled "America's Youngest Hospitality Mogul: How Lily Harrison Built an Empire from Scratch." The article detailed every aspect of our growth story, from the early days in Austin through the family conflicts that had driven me to succeed independently. That evening, I was scheduled for a live interview on CNN's business program, my first major television appearance since the company had become a public story. I spent hours preparing with our media consultant, but no amount of practice could have prepared me for the host's first question. Ms. Harrison, your success story is remarkable, but it's also a story about family conflict. Your father refused to invest in your company and then actively worked to undermine your success. How do you respond to critics who say this is a case of family drama being played out in the business press? I looked directly into the camera, thinking about all the young women who might be watching, women whose families didn't believe in their dreams, women who were told they weren't tough enough or smart enough or experienced enough to build something meaningful. I think family should be about supporting each other's dreams, not destroying them out of fear or control, I said. My father taught me to be strong and independent, but when I tried to be those things, he saw it as a threat rather than an accomplishment. I didn't choose to make this a public story, but I'm not going to apologize for succeeding despite his efforts to stop me. Do you have any regrets about the way this has unfolded? I regret that my family wasn't there to celebrate with me when we achieved things that should have made them proud. But I don't regret building a company that employs over 800 people and provides exceptional experiences for our guests. I don't regret proving that young women can build successful businesses if they're willing to work hard and never give up. The interview segment went viral within hours, shared across social media platforms with hashtags like #BuildYourOwnEmpire and #FamilyDoesn'tDefineYou. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with messages from young entrepreneurs around the world who said my story had inspired them to pursue their own dreams despite family resistance. But the most satisfying moment came the next morning when Harrison Luxury Hotels stock opened for trading on the New York Stock Exchange. I stood on the trading floor with Elena, Ethan, and Harrison Stone, watching the electronic display as our stock price climbed steadily through the first hours of trading. By closing bell, the company was valued at $620 million, exceeding even our most optimistic projections. That afternoon, while I was still celebrating with our team at a restaurant near Wall Street, I received a call that changed everything. "Ms. Harrison? This is Jennifer Walsh from Sotheby's International Realty. I'm calling to inform you that the Harrison Plaza Hotel has been put up for sale, and the sellers have specifically requested that we reach out to you as a potential buyer. Harrison Plaza was my father's crown jewel, the luxury hotel in downtown Dallas that had been in the Harrison family for 3 generations. It was the property that Robert was most proud of, the symbol of everything he had built, and the source of much of his wealth and social status. Why is it being sold? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. The current owners are facing some financial challenges related to their commercial real estate portfolio. They need to liquidate assets quickly to meet debt obligations. My father's business was failing. All of his efforts to destroy my company had distracted him from managing his own empire, and now he was being forced to sell the one property that mattered most to him. The irony was so perfect that it almost felt like fiction. What's the asking price? $85 million. I didn't hesitate. I'll take it. The acquisition moved quickly, partly because I could pay cash and partly because Robert was in no position to be selective about buyers. The news broke in the Dallas Morning News 3 days later with a headline that must have felt like a knife to my father's heart: "Daughter acquires father's crown jewel hotel in cash deal." The press coverage was extensive and universally interpreted as the ultimate vindication of my business model over my father's traditional approach. Business analysts pointed out that I was acquiring a legendary property at below market value while my own company's stock continued to climb, making me one of the youngest self-made female billionaires in American history. The most satisfying coverage came from Texas Monthly, which ran a feature story titled "The Student Surpasses the Teacher." How Lily Harrison outbuilt her father's empire. The article included side-by-side photos of Robert and me, with the caption reading, "Sometimes the next generation doesn't just inherit success, they redefine it." But the moment that felt like true victory came when I walked into the Harrison Plaza for the first time as its owner. The lobby was exactly as I remembered from childhood visits, with marble floors and crystal chandeliers that had always made me feel small and intimidated. But now I owned it all, and I was already envisioning the renovations that would transform it into the flagship property of Harrison Luxury Hotels. That evening, as I stood in the penthouse suite that would become my Dallas office, looking out at the city skyline that my father had once dominated, my phone buzzed with a text message that I had been expecting for days. "Sweetheart, I saw the news about your hotels. We need to talk." I was wrong. "I'm proud of you. Please call me back." I stared at that message for a long time, thinking about the girl who had walked into her father's office 6 years earlier with dreams and spreadsheets, begging for validation and investment. That girl would have been overjoyed to receive this text, would have called back immediately and forgiven everything in exchange for her father's approval. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was a woman who had built an empire worth over $500 million, who employed nearly 1,000 people, and who had proven that excellence and integrity could triumph over family money and dirty politics. I had everything I had ever wanted to achieve, and I had done it entirely on my own terms. Most importantly, I had learned that some apologies come too late, and some bridges burn too completely to be rebuilt. My father's pride was worth more to him than my success, until the moment when my success became so overwhelming that ignoring it was no longer possible. But by then, I no longer needed his approval. I had something much more valuable: the knowledge that I could build anything I dreamed of, survive any betrayal, and succeed despite any obstacle placed in my path. The phone buzzed again with another message from him, but I didn't read it. Instead, I walked to the window and looked out at the city where I had been born, where I had been underestimated, and where I had ultimately triumphed beyond anyone's expectations. Tomorrow, I would call him back. But tonight, I just wanted to stand in my own building, in my own success, and savor the moment when the girl who was told she'd never amount to anything became the woman who owned the skyline. I'm sitting in my office now, the same office where this story began, but everything has changed since that day when my father's text message interrupted my morning. It's been 6 months since I acquired Harrison Plaza, 6 months since the final headlines about family reconciliation and business empire collisions, and I've had time to reflect on what this journey has really taught me about success, family, and the price of proving yourself in a world that doesn't want you to succeed. The phone conversation with my father, when it finally happened, was unlike anything I had expected. Robert Harrison, the man who had intimidated me for most of my life, sounded smaller somehow, his voice carrying a weight of regret that I had never heard before. "Lily, I need to apologize," he said, and those were words I had waited years to hear. "I was wrong about your abilities, wrong about your business plan, and wrong about what it means to be a parent. I let my pride and my fear of losing control destroy the relationship with my daughter." "Why now, Dad? Why are you apologizing now, when I don't need it anymore?" There was a long pause before he answered. "Because watching you succeed without me made me realize what I lost. I thought I was protecting the family legacy, but you were creating something even greater than what I built. I was jealous of my own daughter's success." Victoria and Blake had also reached out, their apologies less eloquent but apparently sincere. Victoria admitted that she had seen me as competition for Robert's attention and resources, never considering that there was room for all of us to succeed. Blake confessed that he had resented my ambition because it made his own lack of direction more obvious by comparison. The healing process has been slow and careful. I've learned to forgive, but I've also learned to maintain boundaries. Robert is welcome in my life now, but he's not welcome in my boardroom. Victoria can attend family holidays, but she can't have opinions about my business decisions. Blake and I can have a sibling relationship, but it's built on mutual respect rather than the hierarchies of our childhood. The most important lesson this experience taught me is that some people will never support your dreams until those dreams become too successful to ignore, and by then, their support isn't worth what it once would have been. The validation I had craved from my father for so many years felt hollow when it finally came, because I had already learned to validate myself through my achievements and the respect of my peers. Harrison Luxury Hotels now operates 22 properties across the United States, with plans for international expansion into Europe and Asia. We employ over 1,500 people and have become known not just for luxury accommodations but for ethical business practices and community engagement. Elena was recently featured on the cover of Harvard Business Review as one of the most innovative operators in hospitality, and our company culture has become a case study in business schools. Ethan and I are expecting our first child in the spring, a daughter who will grow up in a world where her mother's success is established fact rather than ambitious dream. I think about the lessons I want to teach her, that excellence is its own reward, that integrity is more valuable than approval, and that the people who try to limit your potential are usually limited by their own fears. But perhaps the most important lesson is this. Sometimes the family that hurts you most is also the one that shapes your strength. My father's rejection forced me to become self-reliant in ways that his support never could have. Victoria's attempts to undermine me taught me to trust my own judgment over other people's opinions. Blake's betrayal showed me the difference between allies and enemies, between people who support your success and people who want to benefit from it. I don't recommend the path I took to anyone. Building a business while fighting your own family is exhausting and painful, and there were moments when I wondered if proving myself was worth the emotional cost. But I also can't regret the journey, because it taught me that I was capable of far more than anyone, including myself, had ever imagined. The little girl who was told she'd never amount to anything became a woman who redefined what amounts to something. The daughter who was dismissed as irresponsible and naive built a company that exemplifies the values her father claimed to care about: hard work, integrity, excellence, and respect for others. Standing here in Harrison Plaza, looking out at the city where this all began, I feel something I never expected to feel: peace. Not the satisfaction of revenge, although there was some of that along the way, but the deeper peace that comes from knowing you've become exactly who you were meant to be, despite every obstacle placed in your path. The phone on my desk is ringing now. The caller ID shows my father's name, and for the first time in years, I'm genuinely curious about what he has to say. Not because I need his approval anymore, but because I'm secure enough in my own success to listen without needing anything from him. I pick up the phone with a smile. "Hi, Dad. Yes, let's talk. Because here's what I've learned about true success: it's not about proving your worth to people who doubted you. It's about becoming so secure in your own value that their doubts become irrelevant. I built an empire not despite the pain my family caused me, but because that pain taught me that the only validation that matters is the kind you give yourself through your actions, your choices, and your commitment to becoming the person you know you can be. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between family approval and following your dreams? How did you handle the people in your life who tried to limit your potential? Drop your stories in the comments below, because I believe that sharing these experiences helps all of us feel less alone in our struggles. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help other people find it who might need to hear that their dreams are worth fighting for, no matter who stands against them. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about real people overcoming impossible odds to build the lives they deserve. Share this with anyone you know who's been told they're not good enough, smart enough, or strong enough to achieve their goals, because sometimes the best gift you can give someone is proof that they're wrong about their limitations. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's becoming so successful that getting even becomes unnecessary. Your dreams are valid, your potential is real, and the only permission you need to succeed is the permission you give yourself. Build your empire, whatever that looks like for you, and never let anyone convince you that you're not worthy of the success you're willing to work for.